perfect. Once again, welcome back. There we go. Perfect. Okay. I had to mess with some settings because, of course, I was running late, but got it all under control. And I have realized I need to move some stuff around here because this is just kind of too tight of quarters to try to move around and not bump into everything. But welcome back. It is Sunday, March 22nd. My name is Megan. This is Disturbingly Interesting. It's a show where we talk about things that are strange, unusual, probably pretty questionable, but always disturbing. So today's episode was actually sparked by a recent news event, or news reports, and I am so excited because it is my favorite cryptid ever, and I even dressed for the occasion. It's Bigfoot. Oh, I love Bigfoot. Close second is Mothman, and fun fact, in case you were ever curious, the first piece of content that I ever created for the internet was actually a 60-second TikTok on Mothman. And coincidentally, that is also when my teenager lovingly told me about my millennial pause, which was awesome. So like a millennial pause is where you will like stop at the end of your sentence and take a moment and think before you speak next. But apparently that is the wrong thing to do for social media. But I am who I am, and I like to think before I speak sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. Anyway, so let's talk about some of the comments from the Midnight Club members over on Patreon and Facebook from our last live yesterday. So the first one is from Vicky. Sorry, I need a drink. Also got my Bigfoot mug. Drinking tea out of the Bigfoot mug. Okay, so Vicky, she says, I resonate with you so much. Perfectionist, overthinking, everything, etc. I had a professor at university once where we would derail him on tangents to avoid work. You remind me of that. Vicky, that's very mean, but it's also very hilarious. And I do relate to that. In my real job, I do a ton of research and interpretation and communicating really complex federal healthcare regulatory policy. And for the longest time, I was so annoying because I would not only get derailed by a single innocent question that someone would have, but then I would over-explain it to death. And social media, actually content creation, has helped me with that greatly, mainly because total strangers, they will call you out on how boring you are and how much you suck. So that has really helped. Thankfully, that doesn't happen too often in a professional environment, but, you know, it could. All right, the next question is from Sherry. Sherry says, yay, will you be at a certain time each day this week? So she is asking, will I be live a certain time each day this week? So yes, for this coming week, I'm going to go live at noon Central Time. That is over lunch break. So that's over my lunch break. So hopefully that will be the easiest time for me to do it. Usually I'm not interrupted at that point. I was originally thinking, and I'm still going to go with longer lives on Tuesday evenings. So every Tuesday evening, probably around 7 o'clock Central Time, I am going to do a longer, more in-depth live. But I'm actually really enjoying doing these quick, like lunch hour ones. So I think I'm going to keep at least one of these, maybe on Fridays. I think that'd be kind of a fun way to get you through the workday on Friday, especially if you're the only one that showed up. I don't know, that happens at my place a lot. Okay, thank you for the question, Sherry. The next one from Kathy. Kathy says, on the previous live, when I commented on that your story was creepy, I meant your personal story about the nursing home. I didn't know if you thought I meant the story you told us or yours. I do appreciate the clarity. Thank you very much. It did get me thinking, though, when we do we should do like a true ghost stories episode, right? Where we can tell people's ghost stories. I think that would be really fun. I do have a couple more pretty good ones that are personal that have happened to me, which is kind of funny because I have been working in healthcare for 26 years this year. So, and I've actually really only had like a handful of creepy things that have happened. And when I started in healthcare, I started as a CNA, so kind of right out of high school, and then now I work in operations. But so I mean, was in direct patient care for years, and I've done long-term care, hospice, home care, and then acute care at hospitals. So I have seen a couple of pretty crazy things, but people have told me like really crazy stories. So I think that would be fun to do. The second part of Kathy's question, or not really a question, more of a statement, she says, these missing people in the triangle reminded me of the story I told about the hiker and the guy who vanished in the square, especially the girl in the jacket. Maybe the mountain does open up like that in the other story. Very strange. Correct. So for anybody who does not know, she's referring to one of the last stories I posted on my other channel where I narrate fiction stories that I write. And this last one that I did was about a hiker that disappeared in Yellowstone. And that story was my first like real attempt at like kind of combining the like real world places and real urban legends and stuff that like everybody's really familiar with, like things like Bigfoot and UFOs and stuff. I really want to try to start blending those in with fiction and really get that reaction from people like, did this really happen? Like, is this a real story? Is this not a real story? I will say that so far, that story has about 150,000 views. And I feel like this tactic could have backfired just a little bit because the amount of people that are very upset that I won't show them the actual footage is kind of funny. I don't know how many times I've had to say, but I can't show you the actual footage. This is a fictional story. It's not true. So on the plus side, apparently it worked, which is really good. But in the third part to Kathy's question, she says, I do find it coincidental that the general and the lady that were connected. So in the last live, we opened up with a recent news story about a missing Air Force general, and then one of his colleagues that had went missing in a very similar manner about 9 months previous. She says she does find it coincidental that the general and that lady were connected, but surely if it was something to do with their work, because they both worked for the government and the general was retired from working at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, that others would have disappeared too. I love disturbingly interesting and weird, creepy stories. Thank you, Kathy. And I agree. I'm probably a little tainted because of this world that I have chosen to live in by consuming and retelling all of this weird conspiracy theory, paranormal information. That sometimes I think I like to look for those connections. Like I like to look for those weird connections, and then, obviously I'm not the only one. A lot of people are drawing that connection with UFOs to them disappearing. But sometimes I think that those weird connections, that those coincidences are sometimes just coincidences. Or maybe not. Or maybe that's just what they want you to think. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Okay, so we're going to get into today's topic, which is Bigfoot. Since I am doing these daily, I did not have time for visuals, so I will apologize in advance. You're just going to have to be entertained by cool history stuff and then my overall giddiness to want to talk Squatch with you. So this is going to start out with some news actually happening out of Ohio. So something really strange is happening in Ohio right now. Over the past week, multiple people, I think at least 10 at this point, have reported seeing something in the woods. A massive creature, like 6 to 10 feet tall, covered in dark hair, moving really fast, and then leaving behind a very strong, musty smell, which is just classic Bigfoot. Some say they have seen it while they're walking their dogs. Others have seen it cross the road, and then some have said that they feel like they are being watched by this thing, which is also very creepy. But what's really kind of unsettling about the whole thing is that these aren't or they would appear that they're not really random sightings. They're all happening in the same general area, and I forget the name of the area, I apologize, but the same general area, and then all within a very close time frame, like just days from each other. And if it was just one person, I think you could explain it away, right? Two people, maybe a coincidence, maybe not. But like 10 separate reports, and then all describing something that is similar, it's really kind of where that, to me, starts to feel a little bit different. Why would all these people be seeing the same thing? And, I kind of brings up the question, number one, what are they seeing? And then number two, why are we so obsessed with Bigfoot, right? What is it about Bigfoot that makes it so disturbingly interesting? And this is where I promise I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole. Maybe I will, I don't know. But we're going to start with the history of Bigfoot. Like, this is where I get really nerdy about this type of folklore and legend, because everything has an origin. Things started somewhere, and I just love cultural folklore because a lot of times it starts because, people need a way to entertain each other, right? Or there's classic, like, we want to keep our kids in line, but we don't really know what to do, so we're just going to tell them not to walk into the woods or something scary will eat you. And then those stories just keep getting passed down and passed down. Then it's like telephone, so then it changes over time, and it modernizes to whatever time frame it's in. And I just love that stuff. So we're going to do a brief modern history of Bigfoot. So in 1811, a man named David Thompson wrote in his journal about unusual tracks in the snow near Athabasca River in Alberta, Canada. So he described the tracks as measuring about 14 inches long and about 8 inches wide. There were 4 large toes and short claws on each track. And he and his companions debated whether they were from a bear or they were from some larger unknown animal. So this story is kind of widely considered the first like Bigfoot track sighting story. I do want to throw out there that it is not confirmed. It's not verified, I should say. The story is not verified, but it is really kind of widely thought of as kind of that's the first reported incident. But by the late 1800s and the early 1900s, there were settlers, miners, and hunters all in the Pacific Northwest. They were describing these encounters with these hairy forest creatures. In 1924, there was a gold prospector near Mount St. Helens who claimed to have had a run-in with an ape man or gorilla man. And that really got the ball rolling. I think it might have been a group of hunters or a group of gold miners that had this encounter with like multiple of these ape or gorilla men. They actually ended up naming the canyon after it. I believe it's called Ape Canyon after this incident because it was so strange. And then in the 1920s, people started publishing stories from the indigenous people of the Pacific Northwest. And these were stories that they were telling about wild men or hairy giants or sasquatches, which eventually morphed into Sasquatch. Plaster casts of large unknown footprints, they started making their way onto the scene, which is how we got the name Bigfoot, is because I think there was a reporter that was commenting on one of these plaster casts and called it Bigfoot, and that kind of stuck. And then, of course, the 1967 Patterson-Gimlin film really pushed the Bigfoot into popular culture. And it's really kind of what people think of to this day when they think of Bigfoot, is that Patterson-Gimlin picture of what they found. So, the Bigfoot or the... That was a millennial pause. Did you see it? Now you're not going to unsee it. The thing with Bigfoot history or Sasquatch history is that it's not new. We talked about the 1800s and moving on, but it not only is it not new, it is also not a U.S. or even North American phenomena. So indigenous cultures from around the world have shared stories of these large, elusive, wild beings, and they've been sharing these stories for centuries. Some of the stories even predate written stories, back when it was just oral. And this was before cameras and before the internet and before phones. So there was really no, like, reason, I guess, other than there was no motivation behind it, right? There's not a reason for people to do it. And there was also, okay, I am going to go on a tangent, I'm sorry. Have you seen the show Ancient Aliens with, I forget his name, Giorgio, where they talk about how even just like pyramids, right? There's pyramids all around the world, and these are, thousands of years old, and they're all so similar, but these cultures would have had no way to talk to each other. Again, there's no, they didn't send an email, or they didn't look up pictures of what other people's stuff looked like. So that's kind of how I feel about these Bigfoot encounters, right? So we've got all these things from around the world. So there's the Nantinaq, which is up in the Pacific Northwest, which is a hairy wilderness giant. The Yeti, which is in the Himalayas, and the Yeren, which is Chinese. The Yowie, which is from Australia, and the orang pendek, which is from Indonesia. There is more than just that, but those are kind of like the main, Bigfoot type creatures. And they're all, with the exception of the orang pendek, they're all within that 7 to 10 foot tall range. The orang pendek is actually very short. They're said to be around 3 to 5 feet. And then all of them are said to inhabit their respective cultures' land. Like if it's forest, if it's snowy, environment. Good Lord, that's the word I was looking for. They're all said to be in those respective environments too. So if it's not real, then why does it keep showing up? Right? Like why do we keep talking about it? And I was just keeping a track on time, sorry. I don't want to go on a tangent that much. But okay, so why do we keep talking about it if they're not real, if it's all made up? And then again, like what is the motivation for making it up? Out of all of the stuff that you see, there is some evidence I tried to find that I would think in I'll just say my opinion, I won't speak for anybody else, but in my opinion is probably some of the harder evidence to debunk when it comes to Bigfoot. And that the first one is the Albert Otzman abduction in 1924. So this is a prospector who said that a male Sasquatch family, sorry, my notes are crazy. Anyway, sorry. So that a male Sasquatch family kidnapped him in his sleeping bag, and they held him for days in British Columbia before releasing him. When he got back, he swore in an affidavit that this happened, and he went through all the details of what happened. And again, there was no clear hoax motive or reason that he would do that, especially swearing on an affidavit. The next one is the Patterson-Gimlin film, which is around 1967. And this is the film. I think if you don't know what it's actually called, I am sure you have seen the film. It's the one where they're out in Bluff Creek, California, and they record a hairy bipedal thing walking across Bluff Creek. It's 59 seconds of footage, and there's a lot of people that say if you look at it really close, you can see like the muscle movements or the muscles flexing. The proportions would be really hard to fake, especially with the 1960s technology of the day. It's still highly debated. I did see something recently where someone had put it to the test under AI and had AI clean it up and look at it, and I think you could still argue either way whether or not you think it's real, but I think it's real, for what that's worth. The next one is the cripple foot tracks. This happened in 1969, and there was a local butcher who spotted a deformed print near the town dump in Bossburg, Washington. And then December 13th of that year, researchers found over 1,000 tracks similar to it in the snow and mud, and it was along the Columbia River in the Lake Roosevelt area. The left print in the tracks, they measured about 17 and a half inches long, and it had that normal Bigfoot, like, track. When you think of Bigfoot, that normal, like, Bigfoot shape for a track. But it was the The right foot, so like the crippled foot, it was shorter. It was about an inch shorter. It was a lot wider, and there were only 4 toes that were visible. The other toes were like twisted or turned inward. And the deeper impressions, the longer they went through, the researcher said it suggested that there was, whatever it was shifting its weight because of whatever kind of injury that was. In this particular trail, it crossed over varied terrain, railroad tracks, highways. It went over a 43-inch wire fence, which means it would have had to step over a 43-inch wired fence, and then down some flat ground, and then down into a riverbank. So that's another one that's been a little hard to debunk. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. Kathy, hi. I didn't realize people were watching. I'm sorry. Oh, Kathy, hi. No worries. I'm glad you came. Thank you so much. Well, that's awesome. Sweet. I hope you like Bigfoot. Bigfoot's my favorite. It's probably a good thing you missed the first part of it, because I think I just kind of went on a rant about how much I love Bigfoot. Okay, but so now we're talking about the evidence that, I don't know, I feel like is the harder of the Bigfoot evidence to debunk. The last one we're going to talk about is the Sierra Sounds. These are really cool. I wish I knew how to do more with this stuff, and I will eventually, so that you guys could hear it if you have not heard it. But it happened in 1970s, and they were sounds that were captured by Ron Moorhead and Al Berry during a hunting trip that they took in the remote Sierra Nevada mountains in California. This is a spot they had been to many times before. It was very remote, and they never really would tell anybody where the spot was. They didn't want other people up there. They enjoyed the remoteness of it. And in order to get to it, you had to travel for several days by horseback. So when they were there on their trip, it started out normal, and then into it, they started hearing these odd noises at night all around the camp, and very, very Bigfoot-like noises. Yeah, awesome. I love creature stories too. So it started on the very normal Bigfoot noises, but not normal noises. So like whoops and howls and knocks, and then objects being thrown at them from out in the dark wilderness. And then this escalated to these like really shrill screams and these deep growls and rhythmic tree knocks. And then this infamous, it's called, they kind of labeled it the samurai chatter. It was this really rapid fire bursts of chatter that sounded like two or three things speaking to each other in a language that obviously we don't know. But it is really, really, really cool. And if you have not heard it, you should look it up. Again, it's called the Sierra Sounds, and it's awesome. And this happened over multiple days. So they have hours and hours of audio recordings of this. And a lot of people have listened to it and are just really baffled by what it could possibly be. So I personally, if you have not guessed by now, believe that there has to be something to this, right? I think that there is, I don't want to say Bigfoot is real, but I do think that there is something to this. I would say that 50 million Elvis fans can't be wrong. People are seeing something, and a lot of people are doing it for, your 15 minutes of internet fame or whatever, but there was a lot of people that have said stuff, and it's really ruined their lives, actually. And then also for the longevity of the stories. Like we talked about earlier, this isn't new. This isn't something that we just, as modern culture said, it'd be fun as if we started talking about big, wild, hairy creatures. These are things that indigenous cultures have been talking about for literal centuries. And again, before Facebook, before Twitter, I don't know why I feel like that's important, but it is. One of the biggest questions I think that skeptics will ask is, if Bigfoot is real, then how come we never found a body? How come no one has ever found a body of a dead Bigfoot, right? If they're alive, then they have to die at some point, wouldn't they? And I actually heard a big game hunter respond to this with, I thought was a really good response, is that we think about grizzly bears. So grizzly bears are real. Like, we know that. There is no question of the validity of that claim. We all know that they're real. But stumbling across a grizzly bear carcass in the wild is exceptionally rare. So if it's a grizzly bear that died of, natural causes, the chances of somebody stumbling against that carcass is almost impossible. The reason being is they're in such a remote area, and when they die, obviously there's scavengers and then the environment. So by the time any human was able to get out there, most of them would be gone. Which makes sense if you think about it. But if you think even in much smaller areas where we have maybe a better idea of the grizzly population, so Yellowstone, for example. So we know there's about 1,000 to maybe 2,000 grizzlies in Yellowstone at any given time. And we know that Yellowstone sees about 4 million visitors yearly, and millions of them are hikers. But there's not been one reported sighting of a dead grizzly bear by a tourist or a hiker. So I do think that maybe a little food for thought. It's worth thinking about that if they are actual, living beings, and there's not a ton of them out there, we might not ever see a body. But if we go back to, I'm at 26 minutes, I'm trying to keep myself on track here. If we go back to Ohio, so where we started this out, and Kathy, if you missed that part, this whole story was sparked, and the reason I don't have any slides for it is because it was something I just put together because it was sparked by this, outbreak of Bigfoot sightings from Ohio recently. There's just been a ton of them. So if we go back to Ohio, we think about why are these reports happening now? So why are they all in the same area? And why do they all have the same description of what they're seeing? Witnesses, they're not just saying that they saw something, they're really describing behavior as well. There's quick movements in the woods, keeping its distance but still watching you, and appearing briefly and then disappearing just as fast. And almost every report mentions the same thing, which is the smell. So it's that strong, foul, musty odor, and it just lingers everywhere. And now, really, there could be lots of logical explanations for this. Black bears, I think, are commonly mistaken for Bigfoot. They actually do stand on two legs and walk, and it is super creepy to see. I think if I ever saw it out in the wild, and for anybody who knows me, I have a super overactive imagination, so I probably would immediately assume it was Bigfoot. But they also smell really bad too. And so Kathy says, my husband said a woman was on a show several years ago after her husband died that said he made up the Bigfoot story and it took off. I've heard a couple of times that, people have claimed maybe it's ownership of the Bigfoot story. I think even the Patterson-Gimlin film, that well-known film, I think there was a couple of people that had come out and said that they were the person in the Bigfoot costume. And truthfully, I think it's a lot like ghosts. I personally, I don't know what has to happen for someone to say, oh, that's a ghost. Because if you have a video of a ghost, people will be like, oh, it's not real. That's not a real video. Or if you have a blurry picture of a ghost, they're like, well, it's blurry. We can't see it. It didn't happen. So I think that probably is the very same for Bigfoot at this point. I think that people are so invested in Bigfoot that it really doesn't matter if there is a logical explanation or not. They're still going to think that it is Bigfoot. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because I was going to talk about this later. But one of the things that I think is so annoying as a Bigfoot lover is, of course, he doesn't believe in anything he can see, right? One of the things I think is the most annoying about the whole Bigfoot stuff in general is the television shows. What is that one called? I think it's called Finding Bigfoot. And not that I don't love watching that stuff, and I think it's great, but it's just these like absolute statements, right? So it's a well-known fact that Bigfoot will make a nest under a tree. It's like, is that a well-known fact? Is it? Or it's a well-known fact that Bigfoot eats a variety of things, eats deer and plant. Like, is that a known fact? Those kind of things just irritate me. And I don't know why, but that is why people don't like watching the shows with me, because I'm like, how can you prove that? How can you prove that that's what they want? Like, I could say it's a known fact that Bigfoot likes his ribeye steaks medium rare, and I would have the same amount of evidence that you do. But anyway, Ohio. Oh, and the other thing too, as I was going to say, is that, you know, it could be a bear, it could be, you know, it could be a lot of different things. And it also could be that if one person talks about a Bigfoot sighting and it gets a lot of attention, other people might say, hey, that person got a lot of attention talking about Bigfoot. I'm going to talk about Bigfoot and say I had a sighting. So it could be that too. It could be a lot of people just kind of riding that train of Bigfoot sightings. You never really know. But all of this stuff isn't even new to Ohio. Ohio has had Bigfoot sightings for a long time. It seems like it's kind of stopped. It will like pick up and go away. But back in the 70s, there was a small town called Minerva, which is such a cool name. There's a small town called Minerva, and it became the center of like this very strange occurrence where people reported seeing these large hairy creatures moving throughout the woods at night. These things would be watching their homes, leaving tracks, and even approaching different properties. And they ended up calling it the Minerva Monster, which is also a really cool name. And just like now, had multiple witnesses, same descriptions, no clear answers. And it just kind of lives in the legend of the town and storytelling. But I'm curious, like, what do you think something like this could be? I think that, like, people that post pictures, there's a ghost in the back. Oh, God. Yes. People will post, obviously I look at a lot of paranormal stuff online, and there is one group that I'm at where people will post just pictures of, I was on vacation, I took this picture, and I can't believe what I saw, ... and then show a picture of the beach. I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking at here. Is there something in the picture? Is there not something in the picture? But then, to be fair, if somebody, there have been pictures of like apparitions or actual sightings, and could do the same thing going, that's not true. That's fake. There is one, this is about ghosts. We're talking about Bigfoot, but this story is about ghosts. There is, what was that show? I loved it. Ghost Hunters. Like the original Ghost Hunters from back in the day. They did an episode at St. Augustine Lighthouse in Florida. And that was one of the first, like, ghost things that I'd seen on TV that was so amazing. And it was where they had put a camera down at the bottom of the lighthouse, you know, where the stairs like swirl up, and the camera down there, and they caught on the night vision a picture of what looked like somebody at the very top leaning over, looking down, and then coming back. It was one of the like creepiest things I remember seeing, and one of the first ones where I'm like, man, that was a real ghost. What was one of the other ones? It could be drunk people in the woods seeing a huge bear stand up. Probably. Like I said, if I was on a hike or if I was in the woods at all and I saw a black bear walking around on you should go, if you've not Googled it, you should Google it. It is really very strange to see, and I could definitely see, especially if you were drunk, that would look like a Bigfoot for sure. trying to think one of the other, like, I would say pieces of evidence, not really Bigfoot related, but just kind of evidence too, and going with that, like, would you, like, is it true? Is it not true? There was a show years and years ago, I think it was like the early 90s maybe, called Sightings. And I loved that show so much. They had one episode where there was an EVP. They were at Gettysburg, and it was like these really cool EVPs. But I remember there was a segment on a guy that bought a house in like Colorado, I think, in the woods of Colorado, and he was going around. He just moved in and taking pictures for insurance. And so he gets to his bedroom, and he's standing at the foot of the bed, and he's got one of those dressers at the foot of his bed that's got like the large mirror on it. So it's the dresser with the large mirror. And so he's got his last picture in his camera roll. And he takes a picture of himself in the mirror. And then when he goes and gets it developed, looks at him, goes to that picture, and in the picture you can see him standing in the mirror with his camera pointed at the mirror, taking the picture. And then in the flash, all around him was just faces. Faces in the mirror. It was one of the creepiest things I have ever seen, and I still think about it to this day. Yeah, and that's not Bigfoot related, but anywho. So, I don't know, what do you guys think about Bigfoot? Yay, nay, real, not real? Do you think it's a real, like, animal, or do you think it's maybe like something that is interdimensional? I think that's one theory. That if Bigfoot were true, if Bigfoot were real, which, again, I would hope that he is. He, she, they are. I would say interdimensional. Like, it would explain why we're never able to get a clear picture and why they're there 1 minute and gone the next. And maybe also why we've never found a body of a dead Bigfoot. But I always love it when these things come up in the news and you can hear about it throughout the country. It's pretty cool. But, oh my gosh, we are almost at 40 minutes. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please give it a like. I would greatly appreciate it. And if there are any particular topics that you want to hear about or that you think would be pretty cool, just let me know down in the comments. Otherwise, I will see you back here tomorrow at noon for another disturbing lunch hour. Thank you so much for coming. Kathy, thank you so much. Was awesome for the comments and questions. And Sightings. It was, oh my God, Sightings was one of the best shows out there. I watched, like, I'm gonna try. It was Sightings, Unsolved Mysteries, of course. Oh my gosh, there was a period when, like, Discovery Channel would just do haunting shows before, like, I feel like before Travel Channel took it all over. There was a show called, I think it was called A Haunting. And I cannot remember the name of the guy that narrated it, but it was so cool. And I think I have watched every single episode of A Haunting that was out there. I was one of those kids that when I stayed home sick from school, that's what I would watch. Other people watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I watched paranormal shows on the Discovery Channel. But all right, I'm not going to take up any more of your guys' time.